Great to see such a full room here. Welcome to our session on the war for core talent. This is actually the continuing discussion. This time last year at ABRF, we had a discussion around the war for core talent, the first installment of that, and that was around our mostly focused, particularly from the OHSU side, mostly focused on the staff core scientist job family. And I'm Andy Chitty. I'm the director of the University Shared Resources at OHSU. Okay, I'm going to try it. We'll see. Let's see if your magic rubbed off on me. Oh, now it's a blank screen. I really broke it.
There's a secret to it. You have to close the presentation first.
Close the presentation?
Yeah, you close the presentation first, then plug it back in.
And when you say close the presentation?
It can't be in presenter view.
Ah, gotcha. Yeah. Is it working? We'll just have you crowd around the monitor up here. Talk amongst yourselves. Pick a subject. There was a Saturday Night Live skit about coffee talk, where she'd give a subject when she was becoming beklempt. And talk amongst yourselves on becoming beklempt. Okay, so I'll just say that I'm Andy Chitty. I'm the Director of Shared Resources at Oregon Health and Science University, and as I mentioned, this is the second kind of installment of the War for Core Talent discussions. I wanted to mention that if you're interested in any, so I think we'll go ahead. Can you run with this? Sure. Yeah? Okay. So, like I said, this is kind of an outgrowth of our first session around the war for core talent, which kind of focused around on our staff programs. And the core scientist job family is distinct, professionalized, and long-term. We did publish in JBT some information that you might want to take a look at if you're interested in that. There's the link for the JBT article that we published along with Stefanie and a couple of others, one other from our institution, as well as Llewellyn Fletcher from Penn. So that everybody was quite interested in that, and so the discussion was that maybe we should start talking a little bit more about core talent, the war for core talent when it comes to our leadership approach. Some years ago at OHSU, we were able to develop this career structure around core scientists, but the core leadership track has been much more complex, difficult structure, multifaceted, even really hard to codify or define what a core leader is. So, it's definitely not a homogeneous approach for us, and we're not exactly sure how we're going to navigate that going forward. But we've had a lot of discussions around it, and although we're beginning our talking phases around that, which Stephanie's going to share a lot about what we're going through, we're also joined by folks, Sheenah and Shelley, who will be talking about some of the things that they've put in place, which will be really helpful for Stefanie and I going back. And also getting your feedback on what you've done with your core leadership will be really helpful for everyone. So we have the privilege of being, having them present today, and we look forward to that. We hope you leave with ideas that you can take back to your institutions, and we also hope that we can continue the conversations going forward. So I'm joined today by Sheenah Mische, who's the Associate Professor of Pathology at NYU, and she's the Assistant Director of Shared Resources and Senior Director of the Division of Advanced Research Technologies, or DART. A lot of these people, I only have one title. Everybody else seems to have like 2 or 3, but I don't know. Maybe maybe there's a hierarchy there. But Sherry is the professor in the Department of Pediatrics at the University of Cincinnati College of Medicine and the Division of Rheumatology at Cincinnati Children's Hospital Center and director of the Flow Cytometry Corps. Stefanie Kaech Petrie is from OHSU, like me. I've been really privileged to work with Stefanie on developing the Core Scientist series. Her input has been, and leadership has been invaluable. So she's just been fantastic to work with. So I really appreciate her coming and sharing the information and the wisdom that she has around this. So. I'm probably embarrassing her right now, so yeah. So she doesn't like it when I sing her praises, so I do it every chance I have. So she's the director of the Advanced Light Microscopy Core and the co-director of the Advanced Multiscale Microscopy Shared Resource in our Knight Cancer Institute. And she's also Associate Professor of Neurology. I do want to mention that Kevin Gerrish is not able to join us. He's from the National Institute of Environmental Health Sciences. He was my partner in organizing this session. Unfortunately, he got caught up in the travel restrictions. He wasn't allowed to travel. Then he was allowed to travel, and then a couple weeks ago he was told he wasn't allowed to travel. So I'm really sorry that he's not here, and I appreciate you all jumping in on the conversation because he was going to help me facilitate that. So I'm depending on you to kind of fill that void. And I'm Andy Chitty, the Director of University Shared Resources at Oregon Health and Science University. So let's move on. I'd like to now turn it over to Sheenah.
So thank you, Andy and colleagues, for putting this session together. This is really near and dear to my heart. I'm going to give you a little background. DART was established in 2010 at NYU Langone. That was the year that I was recruited to NYU. I had been in pharma, and before that I had been in academia. The reason being why they recruited me was because they had a problem. They had a new dean, and there was an internal review of how were they going to make NYU a strong research institution. And so there was an internal committee, and the internal committee said, we have cores here, there, and everywhere, but nobody seems to know what we have, and we need to have technology and expertise. So number one, I was dealing with an enlightened leadership, because I think many of you, the struggle that you'll have is convincing leadership that this is an important thing to do. So let me get into it. So this was their outcome. You know, they wanted to improve the scope and quality of research. They wanted to prevent unnecessary replication of instrumentation and expertise. They wanted to facilitate translational research, and they wanted to provide education to increase awareness of technology utilization and train the next generation of scientists. So this was essentially my marching orders. So, as I said, this was the problem. There were at least 60 cores, quote unquote, that were in multiple departments. They were all over the place. In fact, there were so many that they couldn't even give where things were, where the instruments were, who was doing what. They were pretty much operated as fiefdoms. So if you were friends with somebody or you had some money, you would be able to get access to technology. It was incredibly inefficient. The other thing I should say is in Manhattan, space is king. And so, again, having all of this duplication was really putting a crimp on what they wanted to do in terms of faculty recruitment. And the biggest thing, there was a lack of transparency and financial accounting, right? It was costing them so much money. So this was the plan that I laid out to create a personnel scheme, if you will, with clearly defined roles and responsibilities. Remember, I was coming from pharma, and so I also spent 3 years in HR in pharma building career paths. So my focus was, we want to do translational science, we're going to build a team. And so we recruited and nurtured scientists that already were hired at NYU who had this high level of expertise, but most importantly, a strong collaborative nature. The other thing, everybody got to be appointed as faculty member. Now, a lot of people balk at this. They say, you know, what, they're getting paid for their work. Why do they need to be faculty? Core scientists should be faculty, okay? They are partners, and they have to be seen as equal. In fact, sometimes they're better than our side because they understand collaboration and teamwork. So faculty appointments, it was non-tenure, but I effectively argued that if a core director wanted to desperately become, you know, a tenured faculty, you know, it's a steep climb. You have to have at least 2 R01s. And I'll tell you, in our current situation, it is going to be difficult no matter whether you're tenured, non-tenured, wherever you are. I had to work with HR to create these job classifications with career paths for actually all the core scientists. That's a whole nother chapter, but Andy has covered that with Stefanie a long time ago. We had to reorganize things, we had to centralize, we had to promote this strong educational program to enhance that technology. We had to do continuous, you know, training and education. So essentially, we were raising the profile of DART. And so this involved, of course, the marketing piece, if you will, you know, the lunch and learns and the teaching at graduate level courses and journal clubs and user clubs and, you know, getting involved with the research community. And of course, mentoring as a huge priority. So our core directors are full-time, non-tenure faculty. They are in the research educator track. They have to have certain, you know, criteria. They have to set team goals. They have to motivate their teams. They have to be comfortable not knowing everything because they are literally at the bleeding edge, okay? It's not, you know, every day somebody's coming in with, how are we going to do this? And really important, developing cross-functional teams. So we're working across our many technologies and our expertises. They have to be collaborative, flexible, good communicators. They have to like people. They have to be broad thinkers, problem solvers, and entrepreneurs, because this is all about innovation. So how are they evaluated? Well, they are judged excellence in service. So in terms of their promotion and review, these are the criteria, right? They are epitomizing a culture of excellence. Okay, so this gets to rigor and reproducibility and what is delivered in terms of data from their cores. They are exhibiting strong collaborative natures in terms of what are they bringing to the institution. So it's not just about them, it's about what they're bringing to the institution. And the contributions to the academic mission. So directing a core resource laboratory, number one. Number two, serving as collaborating investigators. Number three, selection as a grants reviewer, which many of them are. Selection on editorial board members, national consensus panels, and so on. Now, the other thing is the publications and acknowledgments. They don't have to be co-authors. They don't have to be first authors. The publications that come out of the core are counted for their promotion criteria. And so we work with our library to track all of this. And this is where this RRID number comes in. Really, really helpful. I have to encourage all of you to adapt this for your course. And then the last, of course, is funding. So many of this is S10 grants, but also in terms of other grants that they have helped write. We have a lot of anecdotal evidence of grants being submitted, being rejected, and then being resubmitted with our core directors writing sections of the grant that then get funded. So this is really important. We also created a leadership development program with our HR department. And it focused on Lominger competencies. This isn't critical. Everybody has different competency levels that they use. But our focus, obviously, customer focus, developing direct reports on others, teamwork and collaboration, and conflict management, because this is a daily occurrence. Team development, really, really important. For our leadership development, we used a 360 multi-rater feedback. So that means that coworkers, so peer, as well as people who reported into the core director, as well as the people who oversaw the core director, to give feedback, honest feedback in terms of what's working, what's not working. We did a lot of one-on-one coaching. We did a lot of group activities, mentoring, and of course the Harvard Business School courses that are available online. So, again, these are the competencies that we really focused on. I'm not going to belabor it because these all make sense. In terms of team development, how do we define success? Well, better way to assign component tasks, communication, mutual understanding of roles and responsibilities. The other thing is in terms of many of the projects that we work on, like it's not unusual that a PI will come to a core director and say, I'd like to do this project. And what we've made sure of is that our core directors are well-versed in terms of everything else, so that they can speak to and say, well, I think you really should include Kathy in this discussion. We'll have a project meeting, a planning meeting, and we work out a lot of the stuff early on in terms of the experimental design and planning. And in fact, I have to emphasize that this is really important because establishes expectations. Expectations in terms of publication, expectations in terms of what ultimately is going to go into generating the data for a publication, for the grant, for whatever it is, okay? So how do we measure success? We look at innovation, we look at customer satisfaction, resource utilization, and that really gets down to budget. And I have to say that all of our core directors are very well versed in what their financial obligations are. We meet on a monthly basis with our finance director. Everything is transparent. We have these discussions with our advisory committees. I mean, I have to say how important that transparency is. And then, of course, the leadership, because, again, we started this in 2010. We're now in 2025. And I have to say it's really incredible to see how people have developed. And more importantly, the talent that we've been able to recruit. So it's a great group. And I'll leave that there, and on to Sherry.
Thank you, Sheenah. So today I'm going to talk about, since I'm a core director, how I got to be a core director, a little bit about that. I was asked to do that. And then I'm going to talk about how it looks at Cincinnati Children's and the UC, or University of Cincinnati College of Medicine, and then a little bit about what we've all kind of discussed about core directors and things. So for myself, I've always had a tendency to gravitate to technologies and answering scientific questions. Even as an undergrad, I like to adapt new technologies, which here seem old because I've been in it for a while. So you look at, as an undergraduate, I was able to do transformation of algae, which was something really cool, I think, at my undergraduate institution. We put an endotoxin into algae to actually help kill mosquitoes. So I thought that was really cool. So I got to do that. That was something that had never happened at that institution. As a graduate student, it sounds kind of silly, but I put a single base pair mutation into a transgenic mouse that was a 10 kb construct, and it had never been done at Children's. But, I was able to use resources and actually help people. So looking back, I can see that, I liked doing these kind of things and implementing new kinds of technologies, and that helped me, I think, become a core director in the end. But as a research assistant professor, I became a core director, and these kind of things, like we did gene chip analysis, we were one of the first that implemented at Children's and things like that. We had mouse models of arthritis. But then I started in my postdoc, actually before that, I had done some mouse models of arthritis, but I used a lot of that. And also, my postdoc was the first people to have a research flow cytometer at Cincinnati Children's. So I actually stayed when my mentor left and took over the flow core. And that's when it began. We got a P30, a center grant, and I became the director of that P30 center grant. And then in 2008, we put all that instrumentation together, and we were like one of the first centralized cores at Cincinnati Children's. So I began as a research assistant professor. I changed to the field service track. And that is a track at Children's that I'm going to talk a little bit about more. It focuses on service, sharing technology to others, and also you collaborate with investigators. Rather than writing your own R01s and things like that, you collaborate with them. So at Children's, all Cincinnati Children's Research Foundation faculty have an appointment at the University of Cincinnati College of Medicine in the Department of Pediatrics. The field service track allows for the departments and the divisions to create specific criteria for your position. So you actually create that with your division director. You use a lot of the criteria from the other tracks, which are research, clinical, and educator. But the metrics are specific to the criteria that you actually establish. So you establish your criteria and your metrics, you go over them, and then you figure out when you're going to be ready to go up and be promoted, okay, or be reappointed. These tracks are non-tenure tracks, and you go up for reappointment at different intervals depending on whether you're an assistant professor or associate professor. Okay, so this is just an example of some of the criteria. I've written many S10 grants, but as an assistant professor, you would probably aid in gathering that information. Associate professor, you might be a PI. The professor level, you would definitely be a PI on that grant. Okay. A lot of the things, at least as they're explained, and this may be different at all institutions. I'm just an example. That's what I'm here for anything. So a lot of us, what has been explained to me for Cincinnati Children's is that when you're an assistant professor, you're trying to get things on your resume. You're trying to do things for yourself. When you're an associate professor, you start doing things for others, okay? Like maybe you're maybe you're more at the local level as an assistant professor. Then you start doing things at the regional or also local level. And then when you get to be a professor, you start looking at how can you help others? How can you bring, so I mentor a lot of people, even in our division. I mentor them and I help them with their essays. So, but also at the national level, then you have to have recognition for certain things as well. So it's just a model. And this is a way that we do it at Cincinnati Children's. So some of the stumbling blocks with this model, though, is that sometimes people include criteria that are more for tenured tracks. Since we are in divisions, our bosses, our supervisors, directors of those divisions are used to looking at clinical or research people, and they want to see those grants, they want to see those publications. Those are things that are important to them. So we have to remind them of our field service criteria and what's going on for them. But if in the beginning you say, okay, I'm going to get 3 publications a year, and you become mainly a core director, that may actually not happen. So it's just a stumbling block that I've seen at our institution. And also grant funding. Like I said, they're used to you doing that, but our grant funding is a little different. You know, I'm on 2 center grants, and I also do S10s quite often, and I'm a collaborator. I have the privilege of being actually able to do about 30% of my time research, so that's pretty nice as well. And I know a lot of people, we've been talking about whether people should be in divisions or departments or whatever, or it should be centralized. I'm a big proponent of it being in the division because in my situation, I can work, I can establish those collaborations, and those can help pay for some of the technologies that I can develop or implement into a core. And for me, it's worked really well. Another stumbling block would be, again, not aligning those service roles with your criteria. It was very odd because I was one of the first to do this at Children's. So, you know, saying, okay, we're going to incorporate the cytometer and have 100 or 500 hours billed by the end of the year. That was just kind of weird for me. But those are the kind of criteria that we did. And then not aligning your yearly goals. So we have a yearly evaluation. Not aligning those yearly goals with your criteria can hurt you, and if you're not, you know, to be able to go up for promotion. Okay. So these are things that we all talked about, but I'm going to give my perspective on this. So what makes a good core director? I think everybody, would agree on this. You have to have expertise in a specific field. You have to be the expert for your institution. Other things that come in are, I can't get this pointer, I'm sorry. Leadership and management skills. You need to be able to stand up for your team, go to administration when you can, and be able to have the knowledge to do that. I've been lucky that I've been able to go to a lot of leadership courses, and I think our institution supports that. You need to multitask. Everybody knows that, I think. A good core director has to be doing like 50 different things at once. So you need to be customer service oriented. I always say we're the best bartenders in our institution. So that's what you really have to be. You have to be able to listen, and you have to be able to take in what they're saying and provide that service at the end. Being patient and objective. Sometimes people come to us, I think Sheenah was saying this, you see those conflicts all the time. You have to be objective from both sides and be patient in how you're going to address those kind of things. Challenges that are faced for core directors, again, funding and the expectations of that. A lot of people come into this position just like me. I was not a core director before. It was kind of new in our institution. I learned how to budget, I learned how to bill. It is like a small business, which I really, really liked, but I didn't know it until I did it. So, and getting those skills sometimes can be a little difficult. Again, access to development of technology, I think being in a division where you can use the technology that you're doing and being able to develop and implement that is important. And then being recognized for your talent and your expertise. That's, at our institution, I think it comes pretty well. But a lot of times that doesn't happen, and I think it could be a challenge for people. Okay. And then we've talked about this in other sessions, I've seen it, are the core director positions, should they be supported by administration or by a division? The grant funding again. One thing I think that is really important, and when I started the core, is to get investigator buy-in. I started an advisory committee immediately with people from not all the divisions, but the major divisions that use flow cytometry, because I run a flow cytometry core. So to get their buy-in, that was great, and then they could also go to administration. I think that's important. And then in our institution, the shared facilities are included in the strategic plan. They are one of the separate pillars even for the institution. So I think that's a really, really important thing to help support the core directors. Okay, and then I'm going to hand it over to Stefanie.
So I'm going to talk about what we are trying to do at OHSU, and as Andy has mentioned, it's been a little bit of a struggle. So don't expect that I'm going to give you a finished product, because we are still on the way. The reason I wanted to address it now is the following problem. I looked at our composition of the different core leaders we had in our portfolio, and it's a relatively small portfolio. We're less than 20 cores. And I realized that we had a bunch of different levels, all with different criteria for promotions. And it was not clear to me how we are going to replace these core directors, because the initial wave of the cores at our institution was established by faculty members who decided that they wanted to do some technology expertise, and they created a core. But they were retiring, and what the institution did was replace them with staff scientists, because these core directors wanted to get their core to continue, and they recruited internally. They took somebody of their core and trained them up to become a core director, and that was the easiest way of going for the institution, to replace these core directors with internally recruited applicants. So for the first generation core directors, it was easy to get promotion because they all were faculty members before, and they had a split, in the beginning, a split duty to also do research on the side. So that helped them with the promotion. I had one question when I saw this happening, is what are we losing when this composition goes into this more staff scientist direction? And I think it's what Sheenah and Shelley have already pointed out. It's the connectivity to the research mission at our institution. So I was concerned about this. So the challenges we have that are not completely unique to OHSU is that, the current co-directors are in 3 schools and centers, each have their promotional policies. Even in the School of Medicine, where we have 10 faculty being co-directors, they were in 7 different departments, each with a separate P&T committee that really didn't know what a co-director was because they had one unicorn in the department. The other problem was that the staff scientists were actually under the provost's office authority, but the cores were centralized under the VP for research. So the first thing that I did is I went to the provost's office and I said, explain to me why you feel that staff scientists is the place where we should go with the co-directors. And they felt that co-directors don't need to be faculty because they can be collaborators on grants as key personnel, and that would be enough to sustain the program for long term. But it would really be better if all of the co-directors were in one single unit and they would have the same developmental progress and expectations for promotion. Now, I feel that, as Shelley has indicated, it's really important that they had the option to be an affiliate member to a department where they were really tightly connected with their expertise. And that was not possible as a staff scientist because they couldn't get an affiliate position at the faculty level as a staff scientist. So, yeah, that was an issue that we needed to address. So if I had to do this again, this whole negotiation, these are the steps that I would take. This is not what we've done. This is what I've learned that we should have done. So the first thing is you will have to talk to a lot of people at your institution that might be unfamiliar what co-directors do and why they are so important. So you need a really high-level document that just explains why the co-directors are unique and why they are very important to your institution. We needed to create a list of what they actually do because HR really didn't understand what we were doing as co-directors because we're running small businesses. They don't understand that this is not only technology expertise but also business skills and communication and all the other parts that were already mentioned. The next part, I think, is really also important, and that is to create documents that indicate that you really are working on a framework that will be sustainable. And that means that you have documents that indicate how you're going to onboard a new core leader, how you're going to support their professional development, and define the promotion criteria so that it is clear what is going to happen over time. And this takes a long time because you have to talk to your colleagues that are doing completely different things and figure out what they need for their particular core, because like microscopy and genomics are just really different. Okay. Then we created a leadership framework proposal document, and I thought that the next step will be to find the stakeholders at the institution that are actually going to vouch for us and going to make that happen. And that's where we are stuck at the moment because it was January, and then, things changed, and now we are in a holding pattern. Okay, so the hurdles that I encountered and hopefully lessons I learned. I like to be very reactive as a co-director, correct? There's a trouble to be solved, and you go in and you solve it, okay? So I wanted this to be very fast, but you can't expect this to be fast because nobody thinks that this is a priority, okay? So be patient. But if you're prepared and there is a planned succession in one of the cores, that will be a moment to come up and say, hey, how are we going to do this at the institution level in a very directed way to get the best person in for doing this job, with all of the criteria that they mentioned, which are very unusual for a faculty member, but are needed for the co-directors. And the other thing is, it's always easier for stakeholders to make a decision between two proposals than to, just have to come up with a solution themselves. It's this old problem, if you give somebody an option, they know immediately which one is the better one, and then you can direct them in that way. So create two proposals, one that you like less, but hopefully it's going to be the one that they reject. Okay. The other thing that was really surprising to me is that, I had an initial plan, and I presented it to my fellow co-directors, a subset of them, and I found that they were really opposed to what I proposed, okay? And the reason is I had gotten in this job as a faculty member that was supported by a P30, and I never had a research program on the side. So for me, being labeled as a staff scientist was not a big deal. So I had proposed a framework where we take these co-directors and we actually put them in the staff scientist track. But you heard from my colleagues that that is a mistake. And I learned it when I proposed it to my colleagues, because immediately they said, you're not going to be able to hire a good co-director unless you give them a faculty position. Okay? So where are we at? I have two scenarios that I would like to propose to the institution. One of them is that we are going to give them faculty positions, and they will have to split their efforts between running the core and the research program. We will put them under one hat with recommendations that they are in one particular unit, but they get to be affiliated with other schools and departments. There are a couple of stumbling blocks here, or sticking points. One of them is, this is only going to be doable if we can support these faculty directors 100% in their salary. Otherwise, it's just not going to work because nobody would take this position. The other thing is that if you give a position that is a split commitment between core and research, be aware how difficult this is going to be in the current climate for incoming young faculty. But if you go and you want to hire these positions at mid-level or late-stage faculty, then it's going to get more expensive again. The other possibility is, and they were actually in our group, a couple of co-directors that were on the side that I was, I'm fine with the staff scientist position, as long as I have a faculty member that helps me maintain the connection to the core missions at OHSU. But we wanted to make sure that if we decide that the co-director goes into a staff scientist position, that the faculty consultant that they have is not just somebody on a core advisory committee, but somebody that has skin in the game. So they get paid for that role. But we don't want to create a hierarchy, correct? It needs to be that this is a collaboration between a staff scientist co-director and a faculty member. So the faculty member actually gets, needs to show effort every year. And if they don't do what they are supposed to do, the co-director can say, I would like to have somebody else be my partner in this. That would be one way of preventing that this is developing into a hierarchy. So this is my proposal at the moment, correct? It's kind of to give flexibility and leave the co-director the option to decide what they want to do themselves. Okay, so that was the end of my presentation, and I'm going to give it over to Andy for the discussion.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you so much for those presentations. One of the things that we wanted to put up for everyone's discussion, we want you to bring up your questions or your thoughts or your comments. But there's a number of questions that we thought of that we could bring up as well. You know, do you know other models of core leadership that we haven't discussed here? Can you recruit highly effective leaders without offering faculty appointments? That's one that I'd really like to hear what other people think, because you heard different sides of that argument. Let's talk about what is a core director, and what do we need to do to make sure that we entice high-quality core directors for the positions? What are good ways of approaching the research administration or executive leadership to create these leadership structures in cores? How do we work together to raise the stature of core leadership and the core scientists in that process within the academic environment? And then, don't want to focus on this too much, because I know we're having all kinds of discussions around here, because this is discussing, core leadership activities, but does our current situation that we find ourselves in right now offer opportunities for shared resource models and in that vein for the leadership of cores down the road? So I'll open it up for comments or questions, and then just have our panelists jump into the conversation as we go.
We're kind of in the same boat as well at this point, because it all started with the history of some core directors who are faculty they couldn't get rid of. So now everything has to be a staff scientist position. But this is one problem I do think is we're running into as part of centralization. I think some schools, especially School of Medicine, is more open towards the faculty appointment compared to other schools, and that so the whole centralization model that I was talking about does not always work. This is one more reason. But we have run into a unique issue. I mean, yes, they will need to make some faculty, but what are not track, right? We had a unionized environment, and in the collective bargaining agreement, the pool for non-entities is fixed. So when you're giving your annual raises, it's like insult to the person who did such a great work and give them $500. Whereas on the other hand, if I have a staff scientist, I can give them more money. So it's that, I don't know if anybody else has run into it, and if there's something that you have found that works around that.
So our institution is unionizing right now, and that means I can't talk about it, correct? So generalization. So one of the things that we did kind of think about is that if the staff scientists supervise other people, then they actually are not part of the union. Correct. So there's a difference between a leader who has direct reports, and so we try to suggest that they need to be pulled out of the unionization process, but that's ongoing.
I'm sorry.
Oh, it's on. Cool. Sorry. So I don't necessarily think core directors need to be faculty to entice someone to come to the job. But what we do need is a livable wage for our region and a sense of job security. And I think oftentimes for core facilities, those are missing. And as someone who lives in a very expensive area, it is extremely challenging to recruit someone in when they then qualify for low-income housing to run this job. That's the biggest challenge we face. And then if we can pay them well enough, then you can do stuff. So if you have money, I'll take it.
See me afterwards. I'll round up some money for you. It was interesting because Aaron Nilsson, who worked with us on talking through the core leadership approach, his sort of three-legged stool that he talks about is, for a core director, they need to have sort of a leadership position, one. Two, they need to have a faculty appointment he maintained, and then the money side of things. So, where Stefanie and Aaron were kind of going back and forth a little bit about the faculty position, we also recognize that they need to be compensated and they need to have a sense of having a leadership role. I'm not, we kind of went back and forth a little bit about that, and I don't know if you want to comment on your responses to that.
Well, we are not we are in a better position because we have actually at our institution staff scientists that were making very livable wages. So that was not necessarily a problem for us. We were able to, in the staff scientist track, to see that the salaries would be adequate. Now, they're not faculty salaries, correct? But they would be adequate for what I consider, yes, I can actually turn off my phone at 8 o'clock at night and I don't need to work till midnight. Because I'm a staff scientist, this is fine. And for that, I take a pay cut.
Thank you.
As far as the job security, I don't know. I mean, to me, it seems like it's potentially more secure right now than trying to go out and get your own grants. So it might be a plus.
One thing I would add is what became very clear to NYU leadership was that if we wanted to attract talent and expertise, we would have to pay for it. So they got a really clear lesson in terms of the value of that expertise. And so, I have to say that most of our core directors, when they were recruited, were offered higher salaries than equivalent faculty level. So I think that's really the message, is for leadership, because if they had to turn around and recruit someone to replace you, Joe, I think that they would be very shocked.
You haven't worked with me.
Hi, Natasha Nicolaitis, Purdue University. I will just say that our staff scientists don't take those lower pay cuts to turn off their phones at 8. They're on 24/7 because those are just the kind of people that they are, and they just don't let go. But my question is, when you were talking about having a core director be a faculty member and managing the research expectations, we tried this once, and it was managing the conflict of interest was a disaster. Trying to separate the core director hat with their research hat, and how do you make sure that they're not prioritizing their own research, not just in the core, but I don't have time, I gotta go write my own grant because that's what I wanna do. It was an absolute disaster, and our faculty advisory committee said never again. We're never doing this again. I think that there are a lot of scientists out there who would like to have that option for research, but how do you manage those expectations and that conflict?
Do you want to talk about your?
Yeah. So I think for me, it integrates well, but I also, I've been doing it for a long time. So this is, my effort is, I try to develop things with people, but it's not my main thing. So directing the core and doing all that is about 50, maybe a little bit more % of what I do and what I have to do. Writing grants and things like that, S10 grants, center grants and stuff like that as well. And then also helping manage people and things like that. So in my mind, I think it's okay. I think, also the other directors at Cincinnati Children's, they're kind of in a similar boat, and they've done it pretty well, I think, especially our microscopy guy, and I think the single-cell guy's back there too. So he does really well with, trying to develop the technologies as well against running the core as well. So.
And how we dealt with it at NYU was we pay 100% of the core director's salary. They don't have to write grants. They are welcome to write grants, similar to what Sherry has.
I'm Shelley here in Las Vegas.
I'm so confused. It's like, I know you're Sherry.
Yes, it's okay.
We guarantee 30% of their time in order to do research, but the research is focused on innovation and driving the research. And so what it really turns out is a lot of collaboration, because the core director is often working with other investigators. It's a win-win for everyone. So we did not want our faculty, core directors to have to worry about their salary, and that's really where you get into the issues. So.
Hi, Chad Haney, Northwestern University. Great talks. I appreciate that one of the slides mentioned encouraging the core directors to be on committees. So I was on the IACUC committee for a while. I'm still on the Radiation Safety Committee. It's visibility, but it's also sharing your expertise so other people in the community can see, hey, this core director has expertise in X, Y, Z. So if you're involved with management at an upper level, encourage the core directors to get involved with those committees. The other thing I would add is being research faculty versus staff scientists. I'm research faculty, so running a small animal imaging center, you don't want the faculty you're recruiting to say, I need my own MRI. That's just not going to happen. So when you have a highly visible recruitment and they meet with a core director, maybe this is just my case, but being research faculty, it's easier to talk to a professor that's coming in with a endowed chair or something like that, and you can say, don't worry, you don't need to buy your own MRI. I've got one. I have this expertise. I can do what you want to do. You don't need your own scanner for $3.5 million. So I think that's a case to be made where faculty versus staff scientists makes a difference in recruitment. And the third thing I would add is if you're recruiting core directors, one thing that helped me is making it explicit that I wanted membership to various societies that I was already in, which sets the stage for I need to be going to these meetings to keep my skill sets up. So that should be part of the conversation in the recruitment when you're bringing in new core directors.
Yeah. All great points. Thank you for pointing those out.
Hi, Maria from UCLA. I guess my question is, are all your core directors paid the same, right? Are all core directors created equal? And in that same vein, what if you have multiple microscopy cores across different departments, different schools? How do you, are they being paid the same, and what do you do if they're not?
Well, from the NYU perspective, that would never happen because we believe in centralization. And no, the cores are not all paid the same. So they're recruited separately. They get, some are recruited in as assistant professor. We've recruited in full professor. So it depends on their expertise.
It's the same at Children's. They're not all paid the same, I don't think. It depends on the division, which that could be another argument not to have them in the division, but and also on their level, of course, when they come in.
And I referenced the JBT article. If you want to take a look at that, it's, on the staff level, we had to look at different scientific disciplines might be looked at differently for, market purposes. And so I'm not sure how that will ultimately apply to our core directors, but even when we laid out our core scientist series, let's say histopathology may not be paid the same as someone in electron microscopy, even on the staff level. So that is an important consideration in how you structure things.
Barbara Franzway, University of Arizona. We are also midway through this process, and thank you for the follow-up to last year's session. We started also with the staff level, boots on the ground, making sure they had a career track, and really looking at the leadership track as sort of a secondary goal to accomplish. I'm wondering if anyone up there or in the room, I appreciate the question about pay equity and harmonization about positions, but in leadership, is anyone dealing with sort of certainly nomenclature matters and people's perception of certain nomenclature matters, but the difference between having a core director and a core manager, and whether or not there's any sort of teasing out to be had in those levels, and how you've addressed that.
That's really interesting. I don't know how many people, follow American football, but you have a quarterback could be a star quarterback, or you have the quarterbacks that are oftentimes called game managers that just kind of get you through the game, right? And I wonder, depending on the core and depending on the scientific discipline, is it a star? Does it require a star quarterback for some up-and-coming new technologies, or is it more of a slightly commoditized technology that maybe someone who's more of a game manager keeps things running efficiently might be the perfect fit for that? I don't want to say adequate, because that's just a different skill set. So maybe looking at that, depending on the core that you're recruiting for, you might be looking for a different type of leader in those roles.
For us, I think it's more, we don't really get the title. Our title is not core director at Children's, it's field service professor. So that's, it's kind of dissociated from that a little bit, or field service assistant professor or associate professor. So I don't think anybody has an issue with that, but.
So I think that document that I talked about, the sort of the high-level document, I think that's where I would put that in there, what you consider the different roles, so that it is clear that everybody starts with the same nomenclature, because I do believe it's important. Yeah.
So thank you for all the comments. Today it's been great. My name is Dave Follett. I'm from UMass Amherst. I want to make a quick comment about the salary question. For those of us who work in state institutions, all of our salaries are public. You can go find them online, so you can look us all up and see what we all make if you're curious. My question was also around money. I really liked the number of attributes that you had for core facility directors in hiring and in measuring their performance. And I'm very supportive of all those. But there are some days at work where it seems like all that matters is cost recovery, and money is very important. And why do we run this deficit? All these things. How do you help educate administration that there are other benefits besides recovering your costs at the end of the day as a core facility?
Well, when we're talking about cost recovery, I mentioned this at the business skills workshop that we did on Sunday, that maybe when they're asking you questions like, why do you only recover 70% of your expenses, or why do we have to pay for 30% of your expenses, it's because you don't have to pay for 100%, right? We bring in 70% of that, and so changing that dialogue around and saying, this is critical infrastructure for our institutions. This is what drives scientific discovery forward in the most efficient manner, and so turning that discussion back and flipping that sort of narrative and saying that this is a really good deal for the institution and its critical infrastructure that you would otherwise have to put in some other way. And to boot, we bring in a significant amount of our costs through cost recovery.
I just want to echo Andy's comments. The worst thing you can do is talk to your leadership, and they talk about subsidy. They're subsidizing you. No, it is an institutional investment, and you are a shining star for faculty recruitment, retention, publications, grants. I mean, all of the impact. And so you have to think about everything that you impact in terms of what they're getting for their dollar, for their return on investment. And I think that so shifts the conversation. So.
Yeah, I would echo that too. And I try to determine, and I've done this, it's very difficult, how many grant dollars that we actually support and help bring in. And that's because if the facility wasn't there, they wouldn't be able to do their sorting experiment or their Luminex or whatever. And all that comes in that, and then they're subsidizing us, 10% or whatever. So, yeah.
We're putting together one-page impact reports for the cores portfolio as well as individual cores, and that can help. You just say, you send them this PDF that says, this is the impact we've had. We touched $166 million worth of NIH grants this last fiscal year. We serviced 1,000 different users on the campus. So the impact of cores is really critical.
Hi, Jörg Nikolaus, Yale University. Appreciated all the talks that you gave, especially from DART. I was interested in the structure that you built over the last 15 years. Like, how deep is that organization? For an example, like, are there co-directors that are single-person cores, or is there always research scientists below that structure, or just if you could comment on that?
There is no single person core. They typically have staff, and it ranges from, I think our largest core has 12 core scientists in addition to the core director, and the smallest is 1 in addition to the core director. So, they're all different, but there's no prescribed, you have to have this or that, so.
Heather Jensen-Smith. I'm from the University of Nebraska Medical Center. I oversee our advanced microscopy facility and intravital imaging facilities as well. I guess I have a question, comment. I think it's worth noting and recognizing that we're part of a larger research and academic ecosystem that is critically dependent upon the technologies and techniques housed within our shared resources. And so my question, comment is thinking about, we're talking about what our value add is, what the value proposition is, and there's a couple of different contexts. Do we understand the organizational structure that our ecosystem resides in? So when we're talking about doing a one-page impact report, who cares? Who's my target audience? Do I have 4 target audiences, or do I have 2 target audiences? So we have to continually craft and adapt. But I guess my comment is, or questions about how do we strategize, right? I'm saying things about how do we play the game? What is the game? So how can we as leaders in core facilities figure out what the game is, how to play it, and how to strategize to achieve our end goal that may or may not be related to having a faculty appointment or a staff scientist appointment, right? That depends on the game we're playing. Do you have any overarching strategies about how to identify and work within those networks that are very different in each of our institutions?
I can comment. At NYU, I think there was somebody who had talked about, being part of the strategic plan of the institution. Okay, so Sherry made that very clear. We are part of the strategic plan and all the strategic goals for the research mission at NYU. And so as to speak to that, everything that we do is tied into those goals. And so knowing who your audience is, who your message is going to be tailored to, makes it pretty straightforward, okay? It's not like we have to deal with other stakeholders because, you know, this is what our focus is. Does that help?
I think we have time for one more, but I will say that with those impact reports, we mix and match depending on our audience. We're working on, you know, executive leadership. This is the information that's really important to them. PIs, there's a different set of information that might be. So it's really great to have someone who can, you know, put the right information in there. So one more, thank you.
Hi, Alex Henkel, University of Wisconsin Carbone Cancer Center. Do you require terminal degrees for your core directors to get the faculty track? And also, has moving to a faculty track for your core directors changed the way your advisory committees or faculty leaders or sponsors operate and support the core facilities?
We don't require a terminal degree for a faculty appointment. They'd prefer if they had a PhD, but we have exceptions. And in terms of, what was the second?
Just like core advisory committees
the core advisory committee. So this actually goes back to something that Stefanie said, because, you know, the structure that we had many years ago was that there was a faculty member who got 15% of their salary to oversee a core, and, you know, my immediate reaction was, why? You know, because the expert is in the core, it's not that faculty advisor. So right away, we saved all that money. And so the advisory committee would include people who not necessarily just use the core, but could understand the strategic value of the expertise and technology to the institution. And that changes every 3 years. You know, we ask for a commitment of 3 years, and it's really a fabulous interaction with our cores.
So yeah, we have exceptions too with terminal degrees. And our oversight committees are actually going under a review or a change a little bit, but we're one of the cores that I've always had an advisory committee, and it turns over, and we have a chair and a co-chair that help us with those kind of things. But now we're going to have advisory committees. This is a model that we're just trying to develop over technologies that are similar as well, like 4 different cores that come together. So that's something that we're trying out right now.
Oh, that's exciting. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Let's keep the conversation going as we go.